Hello everyone, and welcome to today's program. I am Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States. Today, I will guide you through my life from my own perspective. Throughout my life, I witnessed a young nation rising from chaos, and I personally endured countless hardships and challenges. From my birth in a small log cabin on the border of the Carolinas to the path that eventually led me to the presidency, my journey has been both legendary and filled with controversy and sacrifice that I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. On the contrary, my childhood was harsh. I was born after my father had passed away, and I became an orphan at a very young age, growing up amidst turmoil and war. The smoke of the Revolutionary War, the loss of my family, and the hardships of poverty, all these early experiences shaped my determination and taught me to rely on myself. Some say these trials made me tough, even stubborn, a quality that defined many of the choices I would make later in life. Throughout my journey, I have been a soldier, fighting on the battlefield to defend the honor of my country, a lawyer, advocating for justice in the courtroom, and a politician, navigating the complex currents of power and influence in Congress and at the White House. Ultimately, I rose to the presidency, a role I take pride in as a representative of the voice of the common man. But my story is not only one of victories and glory. It is also filled with mistakes and controversies. Some of the policies I pursued were seen as expressions of the people's will, while others criticized their heavy cost. I understand that my life cannot be judged simply as good or bad. Yet it is these very complexities that give my story depth and ensure my name is etched in the long river of American history. Today, as you listen to my account, I hope you will not only see the story of a president, but also witness the journey of an ordinary man who, faced with the trials of fate, rose to the heights of power. Along the way, you will also see the choices I made and the impact they had on the nation and its people. So now, join me as we step back to the beginning of my life and discover how a child raised amidst the flames of war grew to become the President of the United States. I was born on March 15, 1767, in the border region between North and South Carolina. My father had passed away before I was even born, so I never knew him. My mother raised me and my two brothers alone, and life was not easy. We were poor, living on the edge of survival, but my mother instilled in us a simple yet powerful lesson. Strength of character and resilience were our greatest assets. When I was still a child, the Revolutionary War broke out. The war cast a shadow over every aspect of our lives. Though I was very young, I could already feel the tension, the danger, and the uncertainty that came with living in a land at war. By the age of 13, I had joined a local militia as a courier, carrying messages between units. I was still just a boy, yet I was already being thrust into the harsh realities of life and conflict. I remember one particular incident vividly. I was captured by British soldiers, and one officer ordered me to shine his boots. I refused. In anger, he struck me with his sword, leaving scars on my hand and head that I would carry for the rest of my life. Those scars were more than physical. They were a permanent reminder of injustice, of oppression, and of the cost of standing up for one's dignity. Tragedy struck my family as well. Both of my brothers died during the war, and soon after, my mother succumbed to illness. At a very young age, I found myself an orphan. The loss, the loneliness, and the grief were overwhelming. Yet, it was also in that darkness that I learned to rely on myself, to endure, and to persevere no matter the circumstances. Growing up under such harsh conditions shaped the man I would become. It taught me courage, toughness, and an unwavering determination. It made me fiercely protective of my family, my friends, and eventually, my country. Those early years of hardship were not just formative. They were the foundation of everything I would achieve later in life. Even as a boy, I dreamed of more than mere survival. I wanted to carve a path for myself, to rise above my circumstances, and to make a mark on the world. Little did I know, the challenges I faced as a child would prepare me for battles far greater than anything I could have imagined, both on the battlefield and in the political arena. After surviving the trials of my childhood and the Revolutionary War, I sought a way to rise above my circumstances. I was determined to build a life for myself, one shaped not by misfortune, but by ambition and hard work. Law became my calling. I studied diligently under the guidance of experienced lawyers, learning not only the rules of the courtroom, but also the importance of persuasion, justice, and integrity. By the time I was in my early 20s, I had been admitted to the bar and began practicing law in Nashville, Tennessee. The frontier was wild and often lawless, and my work as a lawyer was challenging. I defended people from all walks of life, settlers, merchants, and even those accused of serious crimes. I quickly earned a reputation as someone fearless, determined, and unwilling to back down in the face of injustice. But law was only the beginning. As I became more involved in my community, I realized that justice in the courtroom could only go so far. Real change, I understood, required political action. I entered public service, initially as a local representative, and soon found myself navigating the complex world of politics on the frontier. I learned to balance competing interests, negotiate disputes, and stand firm in the face of opposition. During these early years, I also became involved in military service again, this time in conflicts with Native American tribes in the region. These experiences sharpened my leadership skills and taught me the harsh realities of command. I saw firsthand how decisions made in battle could shape the lives of countless people, and I carried those lessons with me as I moved further into political life. What guided me through all of this was a steadfast belief in the voice of the people. I believed then, as I do now, that government should serve the citizens, not the privileged few. I became increasingly convinced that my role, whether as lawyer, soldier, or politician, was to defend the interests of ordinary Americans, to fight for their rights, and to ensure their voices were heard. By the late 1790s and early 1800s, I had established myself as a rising figure in Tennessee. My reputation for toughness, fairness, and decisiveness spread, and I began to be recognized as someone who could lead, not just in local matters, but on a larger stage. It was during these years that the foundations for my later presidency were laid: a commitment to the people, a readiness to face challenges head-on, and a belief that true leadership required both courage and moral conviction. While my early work in law and politics helped shape my mind, it was the battlefield that would define much of my character and my reputation. I have always believed that leadership is tested most rigorously in times of conflict, and nowhere was that more evident than during my military service. My first significant military involvement came during the conflicts with Native American tribes in the frontier regions of Tennessee. These campaigns were difficult and dangerous. I led men who often faced harsh conditions, scarce supplies, and unpredictable enemies. Yet through these trials, I learned how to inspire loyalty, make swift decisions, and take responsibility for the lives of those under my command. These experiences forged my courage and determination, qualities that would follow me throughout my life. Then came the War of 1812, a defining moment in both my military career and my public life. I was appointed a major general in the Tennessee militia, and soon I found myself confronting the British in the southern frontier. The war was brutal and unforgiving, but it was during this time that I truly earned the respect of the American people. I led my forces with strategy and tenacity, never shying away from decisive action. The Battle of Horseshoe Bend in 1814 remains one of the most memorable campaigns of my life. I led American and Allied forces against the Creek Nation, and after fierce fighting, we achieved a decisive victory. The battle was costly, and I mourned the lives lost, but it demonstrated that disciplined leadership, courage, and persistence could achieve what others thought impossible. This victory also solidified my reputation as a strong, determined leader who would fight to protect American interests. Then came the Battle of New Orleans in 1815, which cemented my status as a national hero. Against overwhelming odds, I led a diverse force of soldiers, militia, and volunteers to defend the city from a superior British army. The victory was extraordinary, and the news spread quickly across the young nation. People celebrated not only the military triumph, but also the determination and resolve that I had displayed. It was a moment that changed the course of my life, propelling me from regional prominence into the national spotlight. Military service taught me lessons that no classroom or courtroom could ever provide. I learned the value of courage, decisiveness, and moral clarity. I learned that leadership is about making difficult choices, often under immense pressure, and accepting the consequences of those decisions. Most importantly, I learned that true leaders serve not themselves, but the people they are entrusted to protect. After the triumph at New Orleans, my life changed dramatically. The victory had not only saved the city, but also captured the imagination of the American people. I went from being a regional leader to a national figure almost overnight. Yet, I knew that military success alone could not shape the future of the country. To truly serve my nation, I would need to enter the political arena. The transition from military commander to politician was not simple. I had spent years leading men on the battlefield, making split-second decisions under fire. Politics, however, demanded a different kind of strategy, one that required negotiation, persuasion, and careful calculation. I quickly realized that leadership in politics, much like leadership in war, required courage, but also patience, tact, and an unyielding sense of principle. I began my political career in Tennessee, serving in the U.S. House of Representatives and later in the Senate. In these roles, I fought tirelessly for the interests of ordinary Americans, just as I had defended them on the battlefield. I spoke against corruption, stood against elites who sought to control power for their own benefit, and championed the cause of the common man. These years in Congress were critical. They taught me how to navigate the complex machinery of government while remaining true to my values. Yet my political path was not without conflict. I clashed with colleagues, faced accusations, and endured personal attacks. I had learned from the battlefield that courage meant standing firm, even when facing overwhelming opposition. In politics, I applied the same principle. Never compromise your integrity, never abandon your convictions, and never allow the voice of the people to be drowned out by the powerful few. Eventually, my reputation as a decisive, fearless leader and my unwavering commitment to the people propelled me to higher office. I became deeply involved in state politics, serving as the governor of the newly formed state and later winning national attention through my advocacy for democratic principles and reforms. My military victories had earned me the public's admiration, but my political vision and determination won their trust. By the time I set my sights on the presidency, I was confident that my experiences on the battlefield and in the halls of government had prepared me to serve the nation. I was ready to lead not just as a hero of war, but as a champion of the people, willing to face the challenges of a divided and rapidly changing America head-on. By the late 1820s, my reputation as a military hero and a steadfast advocate for the common man had grown immensely. People across the nation saw in me a leader who could challenge entrenched elites and give voice to ordinary Americans. Yet, running for the presidency was no small feat. It required building coalitions, navigating political rivalries, and inspiring a diverse and expanding electorate. That I first entered the national stage during a time of great political tension. The so-called era of good feelings was ending, and divisions within the political system were becoming more pronounced. Many in the old political establishment underestimated me, seeing a frontier general as unrefined and unsuitable for the presidency. I knew I had to prove them wrong, not through rhetoric alone, but by showing that my life's experiences had prepared me to lead a nation. That my campaign was unlike anything America had seen before. I traveled tirelessly, meeting citizens face to face, listening to their concerns, and speaking in plain language they could understand. I spoke of opportunity, equality, and the power of the people to shape their government. Unlike other candidates, I made it clear that I was not a representative of the wealthy or privileged elite, but of the everyday American, the farmer, the laborer, the soldier. The election of 1828 was fiercely contested. My opponents tried to tarnish my reputation, attacking my character and my past. They spread rumors and focused on my military actions, hoping to make me appear violent or unfit for office. Yet, the people recognized my honesty, my determination, and my dedication to their interests. The hardships I had endured as a child, my victories on the battlefield, and my unwavering commitment to the common man resonated deeply with the electorate. But on election day, the results were decisive. I had won not only because of my accomplishments, but because I had earned the trust of the American people. They believed in my vision for a government that represented them, that protected their rights, and that gave them a voice in the decisions that affected their lives. My victory was not just a personal triumph. It was a triumph for democracy, for the principle that the people should have the power to shape their own destiny. As I prepared to assume the presidency, I felt the weight of history on my shoulders. I knew that leading a nation as complex and divided as the United States would test every ounce of my courage, judgment, and resolve. But I was ready. I had been forged by adversity, tempered by experience, and guided by a steadfast belief in the power and wisdom of the people. My journey from orphan child to military hero, and now to the highest office in the land, was far from ordinary, and the real challenges were only beginning. When I took the oath of office as the 7th President of the United States in 1829, I knew I was stepping into a role filled with both enormous opportunity and tremendous responsibility. The nation was growing rapidly, but it was also deeply divided. My primary goal was to ensure that the government served the people, not just the wealthy elite who had dominated politics for too long. One of the first challenges I faced was reforming the federal government itself. I believed that many government positions had been given based on favoritism rather than merit, a practice known as the spoils system. I argued that public office should be accessible to ordinary citizens, not reserved for a privileged few. This principle guided much of my early administration. I appointed men who shared my vision and were committed to serving the people faithfully, even if they were not part of the established political elite. At the same time, I confronted the growing conflict between state and federal authority. The nullification crisis emerged when South Carolina declared that it could nullify federal tariffs it deemed unfair. I could not allow the Union to be weakened by such actions. I firmly asserted that federal law was supreme, even as I sought a peaceful resolution. I even prepared military action to enforce the law if necessary, demonstrating that while I valued compromise, I would not tolerate threats to the nation's unity. Another significant issue was the national bank. I viewed the second bank of the United States as a tool that concentrated too much power in the hands of a wealthy few, often at the expense of ordinary Americans. I believed that the common man should have equal opportunity to prosper, and I worked to limit the bank's influence. This was a controversial stance, and it generated intense opposition, but I was determined to act in what I believed was the best interest of the people. Throughout these early years of my presidency, I sought to balance bold action with responsiveness to the citizens' concerns. I relied on my instincts, my experiences on the frontier and the battlefield, and my belief in the wisdom of the people. I wanted every American to feel that their government was on their side, that their voice mattered, and that no individual or group could dominate the system at the expense of the majority. These early policies and challenges defined my presidency. They established a pattern that would continue throughout my time in office: a commitment to the people, decisive action in the face of conflict, and a willingness to confront powerful interests to uphold the principles of democracy. One of the most difficult and controversial issues I faced as president was the question of Native American lands in the southeastern United States. As the nation expanded, settlers were moving into territories traditionally occupied by the Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminole nations. Conflicts arose over land, resources, and governance, and I was determined to find a solution that I believed would secure the future of the American people and the Union. That I firmly believed that the government had to act decisively. In 1830, I signed the Indian Removal Act into law, a measure intended to relocate Native American tribes west of the Mississippi River. My goal was to open lands for settlement while also establishing new territories where tribes could govern themselves. I viewed this policy as a necessary step to prevent further violent conflicts between settlers and native nations. Though I knew it would be painful for those affected, I am aware that this decision remains one of the most debated and criticized aspects of my presidency. The relocations, often forced and difficult, caused suffering and hardship for many Native Americans. The infamous Trail of Tears, which occurred during the implementation of this policy, left deep scars and caused tremendous loss of life. I have always believed that my actions were guided by what I thought was necessary for the security and growth of the nation, but I acknowledge that the human cost was profound. That my approach to Indian policy reflected my broader philosophy of leadership, decisiveness, action, and prioritizing the interests of the United States as a whole. I saw the nation as a young country in need of strong guidance, and I believe that difficult decisions were sometimes unavoidable. Yet, I also understood that leadership required responsibility for the consequences of one's choices. The Indian Removal Act shaped the future of the American frontier and the nation, but it also serves as a reminder that leadership often involves difficult moral and political trade-offs. Despite the controversy, I continued to focus on strengthening the Union and promoting the interests of the people. Every action I took, whether on domestic policy or foreign affairs, was guided by the same principle: to ensure that the United States remained a strong, united, and prosperous nation. When I began my second term in 1833, the United States was facing significant economic and political challenges. The nation had grown rapidly, and with growth came tensions between regions, between classes, and between competing visions of America's future. My goal remained the same: to defend the interests of the people and preserve the Union, even when it required bold and unpopular decisions. One of the central issues during my second term was the battle against the national bank. I continued my efforts to dismantle the Second Bank of the United States, which I believed concentrated too much economic power in the hands of a few wealthy elites. I viewed the bank as a threat to the freedoms of ordinary Americans and a danger to democratic governance. I vetoed its charter and moved federal deposits to state banks, measures that caused fierce opposition but ultimately reinforced my commitment to the principle that government should serve the people, not the privileged few. Another major challenge was the ongoing conflict over states' rights. The nullification crisis had tested the limits of federal authority, and I had resolved it with a combination of firmness and diplomacy. During my second term, I continued to navigate these delicate tensions, ensuring that the Union remained intact while also respecting the rights of the states. This balance required vigilance, negotiation, and, when necessary, the willingness to act decisively. I also focused on the economy, infrastructure, and westward expansion. I supported measures to improve transportation, facilitate trade, and encourage settlement of new territories. My vision was for an America that was connected, prosperous, and capable of supporting the dreams of its citizens. Yet I always balanced these initiatives with caution, mindful of the nation's limited resources and the need for fiscal responsibility. Throughout my second term, I relied heavily on my instincts and the lessons I had learned in both law and war. Leadership, I had discovered, was not about popularity or comfort. It was about making decisions that serve the long-term interests of the country, even if they are controversial in the moment. My presidency was shaped by the conviction that a strong, decisive executive is essential to safeguarding the people's interests and maintaining the strength of the Union. By the end of my second term, I had left a lasting mark on the presidency, expanding its power, shaping policy in the name of the people, and establishing a precedent for future leaders who would face the challenges of a growing and evolving nation. After serving 2 terms as president, I retired from office in 1837, returning to my home at the Hermitage in Tennessee. While I stepped away from the political spotlight, I did not abandon the concerns of the nation or my dedication to its people. I remained engaged in public affairs, offering counsel to friends, family, and political allies, though I no longer held formal power. Retirement allowed me to reflect on the path I had traveled, from an orphan child on the Carolina frontier to a soldier in war to a 2-term president of the United States. I considered the victories and the controversies, the achievements and the mistakes. Leadership, I realized, was never simple. It demanded both courage and humility, decisiveness and reflection. I took pride in the ways I had strengthened the Union, defended the common man, and left the presidency with the nation intact and stronger than when I entered the Hermitage. I devoted myself to managing my estate, maintaining my family, and preserving the legacy of my life's work. I also spent time reading, corresponding with political figures, and mentoring younger generations, sharing the lessons I had learned about perseverance, courage, and leadership. Even in retirement, I sought to live with the same integrity and determination that had guided me throughout my life. That I also reflected on the sacrifices made along the way. War, conflict, and difficult policy decisions had left scars, both on me and on others. I knew that history would judge me in many ways, and that some of my actions would remain controversial. Yet I remained steadfast in the belief that I had acted according to my principles, with the intention of serving my country and its people to the best of my ability. In my later years, I observed the continued growth and evolution of the United States with both pride and caution. I knew that the challenges of democracy are never-ending, and that each generation must fight to protect liberty, justice, and the voice of the people. I felt honored to have played a role in shaping that history, and I hoped that my life would serve as an example of resilience, courage, and dedication to the nation. When I passed away in 1845, I left behind not only a political legacy, but also a story of determination and perseverance, a testament to the power of ordinary individuals to rise above adversity, to fight for what they believe in, and to leave their mark on the world. As I look back on my life, I see a journey marked by struggle, perseverance, and unwavering commitment to the people. From my humble beginnings on the Carolina frontier to the battlefield, to the halls of Congress and the presidency, my story is one of determination and resilience. I was never born into privilege, yet I rose to lead a nation, an achievement I consider the culmination of hard work, courage, and an unshakable belief in the voice of the common man. History will remember me in many ways. Some will celebrate my victories, my strong leadership, and my efforts to expand democracy and empower ordinary citizens. Others will criticize my policies, especially those concerning Native Americans and my use of executive power. I have always understood that leadership is not simple or universally admired. True leadership requires making difficult choices, accepting responsibility for the consequences, and striving to act in what one believes is the best interest of the nation. My legacy is one of complexity. I strengthened the presidency, defended the Union, and championed the rights of the common people. Yet I also made decisions that brought hardship to many, and those choices serve as a reminder that even the most determined leaders are fallible. I hope that those who study my life will see both the triumphs and the mistakes and learn from them. What I wish most is that my life demonstrates the power of perseverance, courage, and conviction. Adversity shaped me, conflict tested me, and responsibility defined me. If my story can inspire even one person to rise above hardship, to fight for justice, and to remain true to their principles, then my life has served its purpose. Ultimately, I hope to be remembered not only as a president or a soldier, but as a man who, in every phase of life, sought to serve his country and its people with dedication and integrity. My journey was never easy, and it was never perfect, but it was real, and it was mine. As you reflect on my life, I encourage you to think about the power of resilience, the importance of leadership, and the lasting impact that one determined individual can have on the course of a nation. My story is one chapter in the ongoing history of America, a reminder that every citizen has the ability to shape their destiny and the destiny of their country.